Hello, everyone. This is Tijen Genco. I am Master Certified Coach and Board Certified Health and Wellness Coach. And you are tuned into Coaching with Mastery and Elegance with Tijen Genco. I am such a pleasure hosting very masterful coach training, educator, researcher, Francine Campone here today. Welcome, Francine.
Thank you, Tijen. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's wonderful to have you here. And these are the special edition series for the my Coaching with Mastery and Elegance podcast. And this is the third one. And we are continuing to talk about what mastery is to the masterful coaches, and they people are actually leading the profession that way. So today we're going to have that discussion with Francine. And Francine, how would you like to introduce yourself to our audience?
Oh, thank you. Well, I thought about this question, and there's a medieval woodcut of a philosopher, and he's poking his head through the vault of the sky to see what's out there in the universe. And I really identify with that. I think I'm a person who's always poking her head through the sky to see the multitude of stars and planets that are in this field of coaching, right? And
Mm.
also then coming back to the ground to think about who am I? I'm a lifelong learner. I have a doctorate in higher and adult education with a specialty in adult learning and development. And in 2003, I was invited to participate in the second ICF Research Symposium as a
Mm.
reviewer and editor of papers. And that really ignited for me a lifelong curiosity and energy around research and writing in the field of coaching. And so I've researched and written on a number of topics in the field, including adult learning and in coaching, the coaching psychotherapy boundary, um, adult learning, life events on coaching, the impact of life events on coaches in their coaching. And most recently, I've written a couple book chapters on ethics in coach marketing. And that was very instructive, right? I do hold the MCC. I am an accredited coach supervisor through Coaching Supervision Academy. And this year, I became a master accredited coaching supervisor through Apex.
Mm.
So, I try to bring all of that into thoughtful conversations with colleagues like you, because I think that thinking together about mastery really helps to unpack what it is we're talking about.
Mm. Beautiful. And that's how I actually met you. You were one of my faculties when I was going through the coach training. You were teaching us how to conduct the research in our field. And it's you're not only poking your head through the skies, but you're also inviting rest of us to do that through the research.
I'm glad you feel it. Yeah. There are all these wonderful heads poking through the sky. It's marvelous.
Absolutely beautiful. So, Francine, as a masterful coach yourself, right? The coach training, educator, researcher, and also a guide to the other people conducting research. How would you describe mastery in coaching?
That's the tough question. So I came across this quote from Carl Jung the other day, right? And Jung said that modern psychology and physics has one thing in common, and that is the method of measurement, assessment, enjoys greater recognition than the subject. And I think that's true in coaching, that there's a lot of attention on assessment and certification and accreditation and quality assurance. But we need to have conversations like this to really think about what is mastery. So when I think about what is mastery, it's like asking me to describe the taste of chocolate.
Mm.
I can say, oh, it's milky, it's creamy, there's a hint of caramel, maybe a little bit of raisin. But then I put a piece of chocolate on my tongue and it's, oh, yum.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we can describe the qualities of mastery and we can offer some analogies, but it's incomplete.
Mm.
Zen teacher D.T. Suzuki says, if one really wishes to be master of an art, technical knowledge is not enough. One has to transcend technique so that the art becomes artless art, growing out of the unconscious.
Mm.
Wow. So, in my view, mastery has two aspects. There's what the coach does and how the coach does it. There's what the coach does, and ICF, the bars point out the behaviors, right? And if you look at the language of those behaviors, there are certain words that appear over and over again, right? What the coach does, partners and invites. We see these multiple times. And then we see responds. And then in third place, in terms of frequency, there's explores, curious or curiosity, and whole person, right? And there's also a few key words that describe the style, right? Natural, gentle, flexible, with ease. And these are the ingredients. But what's the taste? And I go to Suzuki's word transcend. And I think that speaks, this is my definition of mastery, if you will. I think that speaks to the coach's ability to express and use techniques and a tool in a way that is unique, specific, timely, and contextual.
That's beautiful. What I'm hearing in your reflection, which is reminding me a little bit of the discussion I had last month with Joel, right? I was also asking him, how do you actually design the tool to assess the mastery? And what I'm hearing in your expression, that there is the sensual experience, and there is the technicality that falls behind the artistry to create that sensual connection and experience. And yeah, I think that, and to me, that there is also the secret ingredient, which is unique to each coach, right? That transcends, as you mentioned, the technicality and technician of as a coach, because yes, those are all validated, clinically tested technical aspects. But then what is the interpretation, improvision, with connects to the authenticity of the coach, and how is that expressed? What are your thoughts on that?
And that's why the first word of my definition is unique.
Mm-hmm.
No two coaches should ever sound alike.
Yeah.
And it is, I like your word, sort of the sensual, the sensory or the sensual experience for the coach, for the client, and in their shared space.
Mm-hmm.
What are the sensory qualities of that space? And it comes about because you've got two very unique, one-of-a-kind human beings putting this together in some way.
Yeah, beautiful, that shared experience. And there is then, you talk about cultivating the self through self-reflection. And in your mind, in your view, how does that actually supports coaches getting into their own unique self-expression?
Yeah. Well, the coach is an essential aspect of what happens.
Yeah.
And it's interesting when I mentor coaches, sometimes I'll ask, oh, what was happening for you? Or why did you ask that question? Where did that come from? And they'll immediately start talking about the client.
Mm.
So reflection is where we think about ourselves and what we are bringing into that space and how what we're bringing affects what happens in that space. And reflection needs to be intentional, it needs to be critical, and it needs to take place with an open mind and heart. We need to really be willing to look in the mirror and say, oh, that's who showed up, right? And to look at the mirror and think about those moments in a session where things went wonderfully, right? What did I bring to that? Because I want to do more of it. And when they went not wonderfully, those uh-oh moments, oh, what did I bring to that? Why did that happen? What did I think, feel, do, experience that brought that out? Right? I mean, when we're in a session, we're in a session. We're in flow, hopefully.
Yeah. One can be hopeful, yes.
Not only in our heads, but we're actually present with what's going on. But when we think retrospectively, right, we have this opportunity to notice that flow, when it flowed, and when maybe it got redirected or a few boulders got put in the way. Right? And then to think about why. What happened? What can I learn from this? Every moment, every experience we have in life, and including with our clients, are opportunities for us. And you know, there's a lot of talk in the coaching world about lifelong learning. And yes, we need to read books and articles, and we need to go to seminars and webinars and take classes. But more importantly, it's sitting down with ourselves or maybe a reflective partner and really getting a fresh perspective on events that have happened, seeing what we didn't see in the moment, and thinking about how do these pieces fit together? What am I taking away that now fits into who I am as a coach and how I work with people?
Beautiful. What you were sharing, that made me think. I often, as a mentor coach, when the coaches struggle, I say, what were you really curious about? And they tell me, and I say, why didn't you say that? And like, I didn't know if I could say that. Of course.
That's, you know, it's so interesting because what you bring up is having people ask themselves the unasked questions. What didn't I ask there and why?
Yeah.
Right? What was happening in here?
Mm-hmm.
What was the boulder in my flow?
Yeah.
Yeah. And not necessarily only in ours.
Yeah.
You know? And the other piece of what you brought out is fun, that because I hear the same thing, you know, well, I didn't know I could.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
We have all these rules, and this goes back to what you were saying about mastery, that it's taking those, they're not rules, they're principles, right? Taking those principles and those tools and internalizing them so that we've digested them, right? And used them in a way that makes sense in this very specific interaction with this very specific client in this very specific moment in time.
Yeah. Beautiful. I use the metaphor of grammatical rules as the ICF or any other actually competencies, so that one can create art of word or art of wisdom or whatever the self-expression is, understanding and sometimes completely disregarding to create poem out of it, right?
It works for James Joyce, you know. I mean,
yeah. And what I'm also hearing in your beautiful expression, that is the key point, right? The self-responsibility and looking at everything that come into our life is about what is in me producing this experience. And I think that there is also the way, as I heard you, if you want to speak more about that, that coaches' interaction with the client pathway to coaches' understanding of themselves.
Yes.
What do you say to that?
Yes. Yes. Clients are our best teachers.
Mm-hmm.
In fairy tales, the hero or the heroine is on some kind of quest, and they always encounter helpers. They have adversaries, but they also have, and Snow White had the seven dwarfs, right? And if we think about our clients as helpers on our journey to mastery, it really changes the dynamic of the relationship. Mm-hmm. There's no longer a self and other. There's this idea that even the adversarial ones, right? There's this idea that stones in a sack, if you put a bunch of stones in a sack and you kind of carry them around and let them rumble, they rub the rough edges off each other. Mm-hmm. And so our clients are really kind of in this, we're like two rocks in a sack, right? And we're rubbing off each other's edges. And when we interact with our clients, it's important for us to notice our reactions, our resonances, our reservations, our thoughts, our attention, our emotions, whatever is bubbling up, and how we manage it or how we don't manage it. Very often, we take this idea that client-centered means we forget about ourselves in the conversation. But in fact, these are wonderful little gift boxes. I mean, I think about the client with whom one most identifies and empathizes, right? What does that say to me about what I'm struggling with? Mm-hmm. Where do we hold boundaries? Right? Or the client whose perspective and mental model of the world is so different from our own that we're puzzled, right? What does that tell me about the limitations of my own mental models and meaning making? And even the client who, like the aforementioned stone, seems to rub against our edges. That's pointing out where we are being judgmental or maybe protecting something in ourselves. So I think there are opportunities that reflection, intentional reflection, invite us to sit down and recognize and explore.
Beautiful. I often say that to my students, whatever you have not worked on is going to come to you in the form of a client. And whether you master yourself through it, then it enhances your ability to stay present with another being. If you haven't, then you're going to rush the conversation.
So are you suggesting our clients are really manifestations of our unconscious complexes?
At least to my experience, that has been the case.
But I think our reactions are. I think you're right. I agree that what happens, what bubbles up is our own stuff.
Yeah. And that's what I call the resilience, right? That when I see the students or the coaches rushing the client through something, there is the place that they haven't yet to develop resilience to stay present, right? Because we can't look at it. And what you're saying beautifully is that the client in a session, right, there is the reflection is happening. That's what we do as a coach, to present something back. But if we think about physicality of that, whatever the client is putting out there through the words and energy and essence is reflecting through our being. And how good of a reflector we are, right?
Yes. And that word energy, it sounds a little bit woo-woo, but there, you know, there is some surface level, or the content level of what's happening, and the behavioral level of what's happening. But there is also that psychic energy that's taking place in that space.
Absolutely.
And it's not usually at a level of awareness. Because if I had to stop and think, right, oh, what's going on for me? Oh, wait, now let me reflect. Is that, you know, is that taking me back to my childhood experience? And the client is sitting there waiting while I process. That's not going to work, right? But that's why reflection after the fact,
Yeah.
you know, enables us to bring that back into the moment and re-experience it with the space of self.
Absolutely. And that's, I call it a sacred space, right? There is the shared space, which I see it a reverent space. And I approach it with that reverence. And then whatever is happening, as you've been sharing with us so beautifully, that to us, it's not only that space is shared for the client, but whatever is we are producing emotionally, mentally, physically, psychically is also contributing that space. So our juju is also in that space. And so the being mindful about what are we putting in there and so on. So, and I think that you also speak about coach's contribution to that space in and it has impact in its mastery. What would you like to speak to that?
Look at what's happening right now, right? Where I'm in Denver, you're wherever you are, it's snowing here. And at the same time, you know, I've come with my ideas, you've come with yours, and we are just playing back and forth, playing back and forth. So, you know, I think it's essential to enter that space in the spirit of real dialogue, in the Bohemian sense, of people coming together and collectively putting their ideas, their sensibilities, their feelings, putting it in the middle and collectively building something that is bigger than either sense, either contribution, right? So I think it's essential in terms of the mindset to enter the space with the idea that it's a space of infinite possibilities. And it's a mysterious space. It's mysterious. Anything can happen. And the coach needs to be operating in that space of two minds. There's the call and response of the interaction, of the dialogue, right? And then also an awareness at the meta level of what's happening right now. We may not be articulating that, but we may be able to bring it back on reflection. And I want to share a really wonderful example of a really masterful coach sort of coming into that space and not knowing that she was in that space. Right? I was mentoring a coach for the MCC exam, and she was working with a client who was ambivalent about going back to her hometown for a traditional event. And the coach very skillfully helped the client kind of create two persona, right? The one who wanted to go and the one who didn't want to go. And she asked the one, you know, if the one who wanted to go said something to you, what would they say that would make this interesting? And the client's response came from way out of left field. And she talked about the wonderful food she could eat. And momentarily, I could see the coach, And then she took that metaphor and ran with it. And the coach and the client, they just played back and forth about food. And of course, there's an underlying level here, right? About nourishment and what's going to nourish me.
Yeah.
But that was not at the surface, and that was never broached. It was just at the metaphor. And afterwards, in the mentoring session, I asked this client, you know, what was going on for you when the client said that? And at first she said, I could see in my head, I was thinking, oh no, what do I do now? You know, and she's, well, all I can do is go with it and be curious. The perfect response. Be curious. And that's where they went. And it was just a lovely example of the coach being in that space with the client and just playing with the client in that space.
Mm. That is beautiful. And I think now we arrived at another space which you're inviting us to, the innocent play, childlike play, and the magic that it creates, right? And that requires, we were at that wisdom when we were young, and then we lose that when we are socialized and distorted. And then when we come to the wisdom age, we start to give ourselves permission again to do it.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
I think the same metaphor applies when we're first learning how to coach. For some reason, we become robotic, right? And then eventually we arrive at the permission giving to the self space. Then we allow whatever to happen and we can go along with it, kind of.
You know, yeah, so I always say one of the advantages of being old is I can say whatever I want. But but I think you really pinged something pinged for me in what you were just saying, and that is it also connects to our work in accepting ourselves, the wonderful, complicated messiness of who we are, right? And that includes our quirks, our complexes, our neuroses, our skills, our abilities. It's really coming to terms with and embracing all of the facets of the self.
Yeah.
And when we can do that for ourselves, we can then do that with our clients.
Beautiful, right? Yeah. Today that the Jungian approach is in our space, and what you're saying made me think about another master Jungian analyst, that Clarissa Pinkola Estes. She has a lot of wisdom in speaking us about becoming an elder, right? It doesn't necessarily have to come with the age, but that arriving at that authenticity and embracing our uniqueness as our unique features of our anime character. Our own spirit is animating through. And that's the touch, the magical touch of our unique mastery. That's what you.
There's a Zen teacher, John, who said that humans are a splendid mess. And those are two perfect words together. We're splendid and we're a mess. And hey, that's great. Because if we were perfect and complete and completely formed, how boring would that be?
Yeah.
Who would want to know you? Nobody.
Yeah, uniformity can be good in some places, but not everywhere, right? In our profession.
Yeah. And I think more about alignment rather than uniformity.
Yeah.
I think that's taking the difference between principles and rules. We align with principles and we demonstrate them in masterful practice.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to say one more thing before we go to the next question. I often get questions from students preparing for the MCC credentials. For some reason, they are getting these ideas from some of the mentors or somewhere, I'm not sure exactly where, but they say, oh, is that allowed by ICF? Is that like, how are you interpreting? Those are guidelines to get you into the mastery. But there is that, as you've been talking to us from the beginning, that our own mental model that says, oh, it cannot be okay to demonstrate mastery or whatever, that is really impacting our ability to self-express. And that leads me into the next thing I want to ask you. We talked about self-reflection along the way, but where do you see the importance of that after the session to see how that session relates to the coach and their growth?
Yeah. Yeah, I think we need to have some particular means, tools, or really surfacing for thinking objectively, right? When we're in the conversation, we're subject to the conversation. When we reflect, the conversation becomes an object for us to explore. So, and you may remember this from UT Dallas. You know, I encourage coaches, for example, to use a 4-column reflection journal. Right? And in the first column, you write down what happened. Think about, I'm a big fan of critical incidents, right? Those moments in a conversation where things went wonderfully and there were rainbows and balloons, and those moments in the conversation where there was uh-oh moments, right? And just pick one. And in that first column, write down, if I were a video camera hidden in that room, what would I have seen and heard? Make it into a movie that you're viewing. And capture the dialogue, capture the expression. That's the first column. The second column, right now you're looking outside the sky there. And then the second column takes you back to the ground. What was happening for me in that moment? What was I thinking? What was I feeling? What was bubbling up for me somatically? Right? What assumptions was I making? Yeah, I'm sure you hear this all the time in mentoring. Why don't you ask, Coach, why did you do that? I think what the client needed was, oh yeah, you know, that's not your business. And you don't know what the client needed. So let's put that aside for now. And the third column is then, what did you as the coach say or do as a result of what happened in the second column? Right? Because it is our internal processes that drive the way we react and respond. And then what are the 20/20 hindsight lessons? Now that you're looking at this from a different perspective, from a third person perspective, what are you learning? You know, what were the questions you didn't ask that you might have asked, and why didn't you? What are you taking away from this that maybe you would want to integrate going forward? And that's certainly one way to do it. Right? Another tool, frankly, is informal supervision with someone who's a qualified supervisor, where you bring an experience to a supervisor who helps you just kind of unpack it and explore what you haven't explored. So that's a person who can really help you, oh, let's hold this up now and look at it from this angle and this angle and this angle and this angle. And let's see all of the different facets of this. I mean, supervision really serves 3 purposes. One is to resource and restore the coach. As coaches, we can get very depleted by our work. And supervision can help us explore what's that depletion about. The second is helping the coaches expand their repertoire of knowledge and tools. Well, let's think about 5 or 6 different ways to do that, right? And then the third is really promoting alignment with ethical standards. And, you know, honestly, since writing those chapters, ethics has been much on my mind, and I'm currently involved in a research project on that. And really, this is an exploratory dialogue. It's a different kind of dialogue that explores together and collaborates, and there's no judgment, right? And then, of course, there's just reflective journaling, you know, sitting down after a session for 15 minutes and asking yourself 2 or 3 questions. You know, I think your question, what did you not ask that you wanted to ask, and why? That's a great question. Or what did I feel was really the point where the conversation gained traction? And what did we do together that made that happen? You know, there's a lot of really good questions you can ask and explore. One, in a 15-minute reflection, what did you notice? What are some loose threads that I might want to pick up next time?
Mm. Beautiful. I am thinking a few things. That one is part of when I'm doing mentoring and coaching supervision, my thing is that when I work with the coach on the things that they need to move through, the competencies starts to flow. It's not that the technicality of it, but the work that is pending to be done is the way, it's blocking the way. And another thing that I look at it, which you started us with talking about the universe and the coincidences, right? That part of my reflective thing is that what is in me called this moment, called this client to me, and what needs to be transformed to and through me, right?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would add that to the list of things to think about in my 15 minutes, you know? Yeah, yeah, it's a great question.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Francine, I also wonder that in your journey to mastery and beyond it now, right? That what were the things in your life, your experiences, brought you into mastery in your reflective view?
Mm, thank you. Well, first of all, I don't know that there's beyond mastery because when we think about mastery, there's no there there. You know, yes, you can get a certificate or some letters that say, yes, yeah, yeah, you're wonderful. But in fact, it's mastery is about the journey.
Mm, yeah.
It's about the journey and continuing the journey. And you know, when you asked me that question to think about, and I thought, oh God, how do I even say that? You know, what is there? Um, okay, so I love coffee. I drink coffee. And my grandmother used to make coffee in this little percolating coffee pot. So I'm a person, I think of my life as I'm kind of a percolating coffee pot, if you will. So, you know, certainly there's been a lot of the formalities, a lot of training, a lot of education, a lot of classes, but not only in coaching, beyond coaching. And I think we need to cultivate many dimensions of ourselves.
Mm.
And not only learning through formal practice, through reading, through classes. I mean, I am a voracious reader. I read all kinds of stuff. That is where I really poke my head through the sky. And if you look at my bookshelves, you'll see books on poetry and tapestry and Zen and psychology and, you know, cooking and, you know, all the history of weaving. All of those things go in, they're all percolating and they're all intersect and interact and interface with each other in some synergistic way.
Mm.
I'm a weaver. And for me, weaving is a critical metaphor. We're always bringing in new threads. And how do those threads, you know, affect all the other threads? What do they hold together? What does it do in terms of changing the color or the dimensions or, you know? So, and then of course I've been practicing Zen for 28 years.
Beautiful.
So I think there is a big piece of Zen practice about, you know, it's all about eroding the ego, which doesn't exactly exist anyway, but we think it does. So let's see it for what it is, you know. And Zen practice, especially koan practice, is endless. It's endless. You never get there because there's no there again.
Exactly.
But it's being able to hold contradictions comfortably. So I think all of these things have come into this eccentric self that you're in conversation with.
Beautiful. I got this memory when you were sharing that beautiful self journey, that when I was in India, in Varanasi, I went into this place where the two men so skillfully weaving the saris. And it was incredible to see them, their mastery in that, and their speed in which going through hundreds of threads. And then also right there, there was a moment they shift the pattern. And I was like, oh, that's how it is. And our lineage that came in and how we shift the pattern in the lineage. And then what you were saying is that weaving also our story, shifting the patterns, shifting clients' patterns, and that's all came into.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. When
yeah.
you were sharing your beautiful story, that's what came to me. And thank you for this wonderful conversation that we talked many aspects about the mastery specific to especially the coming into the self-awareness and how do we respond to our self-awareness, right? It's often when we look at I think about that videos where the kittens see themselves in the mirror. We're like that.
Yeah, yeah,
And we respond to that and then come back to the more settling in and until we see the next reflection, right? And and how to make best use of that and most fun and masterful use of that looks like that is taking us into our journey. So when our audience would like to find you and or the resources that you create, how would they do that, Francine?
The easiest way is by email. I know I'm a dinosaur. Oh well. Francine at francinecampone.com. Francine. And I'm easily findable. I'm easily findable and I do respond. And I love having conversations. I really enjoy. And I've enjoyed this conversation. You know, why don't we do this more, Tijen? Really, we should take.
We need to have this series of this, right? You're giving us an idea. That will be delightful. I mean, it was so joyful to have you in this space and have these eccentric conversation as the elders of our community, becoming an elder to be more
Well, you
authentic,
can
right?
see the elderliness, yes.
Well, you can't see mine with the color, but hey. Well, thank you for this conversation. And everybody who tuned into us, you've been tuned into Coaching with Mastery and Elegance with Tijen Genco, as it is an original podcast from Genco Coaching, where we discuss coaching mastery and concepts of self-awakening as well. So if you're interested, please continue and consider subscribing to this to learn more about that and also leave us a feedback if you like. Well, thank you again, Francine. It's been such a joy and pleasure to have you here today. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Take
Thank
care
you.
for now.
Thanks. Bye-bye.